Hello there.
Hi,
How are you, Francie?
I am fine, and I guess you can see me.
Ah, what a beautiful setting.
Yeah. How you doing?
I'm tired. This moving business is tiring.
Let's see.
We have sold our house and we're moving 3/8 of a mile down to our, well, what is now our office and studio.
I've been in your office and studio. You're gonna be living in there.
Yes,
You had-
upstairs, working downstairs.
Yes, somebody else was renting upstairs or something. I remember now. Wow.
Yes, that was Steve Brox's daughter and son-in-law, but I took it over a while ago. Anyway, it involves getting rid of 90% of our stuff.
Well, that's what I did when I moved from my carriage house and gave it to my daughter's family and have a small space now. And it's quite liberating once it gets done. It's just hard to do.
I'm going to try to remember that.
Oh,
I mean, how many copies of Catcher in the Rye does one person need? Don't
well,
answer. Don't answer
I
that.
think I must have given at least 200 books to library and the rest went into a book drop. Oh my God. Yeah,
Well-
we had lived there 40 years or so, and you know
Wow.
what happens.
Hello, Francis.
Hi, how are you?
Just about. How are you? Steve, how are you?
I'm good, Joe. How are you?
Good.
I'm looking forward to finding out who me is.
Oh, somebody says just
Erica
me.
Brown.
Erica.
Hi, Erica Brown.
Welcome. It's not even your initials. It's actually
Thank you.
a
It's
proper
Manchester, Essex.
document. Oh, thank you. Duh.
There's Sue.
There's both Sues.
Yeah, Sue and Sue.
Hello,
Hello.
trying to get myself situated here. You're gonna do it, Steve. Hi, Francie.
Hi.
Anybody else find it difficult to come indoors right now?
Well, it got chilly out here at this end of town just a few minutes ago, so it helped me make me go indoors, but it was beautiful today.
Hmm. I agree. Well, when you clean up your house and throw away 90% of your stuff, you find all sorts of things. For example, this bookmark.
Yep.
Yep. And it turns out that this is a 20-year-old nonprofit crusade, public crusade and challenge for conserving water.
I think I have one of those too in a folder all about water from about 30 years ago.
All right, it is time and we have a quorum. So may I call to order this meeting of the Task Force on Water Resources, Town of Manchester. Today is April 13th, and we are holding a public meeting online by Zoom, welcoming public participation and our members and alternates and workers. Our first order of business today, before I plunge into the agenda, let me just extend a special welcome to Scott Horsley, who's attending again, this time as a consultant to the task force. And I'll let him a little later describe what the scope of that might be over the next couple of months. But we have a simple letter of agreement with Scott, and it's in front of the administrator and the Board of Selectmen for their blessing. All right, so our first agenda item is to recap the tours. I think most of us attended. I managed to miss the first, but very much enjoyed the visit to the Gravelly Pond water treatment plant. Any follow-up questions or observations from people who were there? I'll just say again, a hearty thanks to Chuck and Nate and the whole crew out there for a very thorough visit. And I'm looking forward, now that the weather's turning, to a close-up view of Gravelly Pond and Round Pond some nice
Yes.
afternoon or weekend.
Yes, I have a date for that. Not quite in front of me at the moment, but in May, Sunday in May.
Good. And Jeff, can we open that up to whoever wants to come and just break it into smaller crews or something?
Yes, yes, everybody's invited. There's no limit on who could come and not come. So we can advertise it however you like. MECT is sponsoring it. I'm leading it, but I'm sure there are many other people that will be there that can break into groups if we would like.
And I'm assuming it's not before annual town meeting, the 25th.
I've been working on it all day. I'll let you know what day it is.
Okay. The reason I ask is that I'm accumulating a list of things we might notify people of when they come to town meeting. And that would be one of them.
Is it,
No, the date, Jeff, is before that.
Yeah.
Before 10. Yeah.
Okay.
the
so we
date's
won't invite
actually May 8th is the date.
May 8th. Then we can announce it on April 25th.
May 8th, Sunday, 2 to 4.
Great. Pleasant time is guaranteed for all, right?
May 8th is Mother's Day, isn't it?
It's especially for every mother, so.
You thought about that, did you?
Well, it's gonna be a problem for me.
Yeah, it's not one of those all-day celebration days, at least not in our house. And, look at it this way, mom can send everybody else out on this walk or hike and have what every mother really wants for Mother's Day. Great. I also wanted to ask opinions about conceivably offering a tour of either or both of these treatment facilities to the public at some stage. I don't want to overwork our hardworking staff, especially Chuck and Nate. But
Yeah,
I
we
think-
can definitely do that.
Okay, I'm thinking of ways that might engage some of the people who are curious and ignorant about it. And I bet there's a few of them. All right, let's keep that on the list. Anything else on the tours?
Do you think that could be part of the survey, Steve? Just like, are you interested in a tour of the facility, blah, blah, blah,
What a
and
good
just get a
idea.
gauge on it?
What a good idea. That's another of the things I want to launch at town meeting is a little announcement of what we're up to and invitation to take the survey. So we can put it both in a little trifold or something that people will pick up.
Okay.
Sue, don't cringe. I'm thinking of something really simple, modest.
Okay.
But okay, next on our agenda is working group updates. And I guess I've already begun group 5, so I'll blurt out a few more things about that. One is that we want to make sure the public knows about the hike and also knows that we are up and running, that we have the 6 working teams, that we're welcoming other volunteers for short or long tenures, and that we have a survey we want people to conduct. And I thought annual town meeting was a good time to launch that. But I'd love some feedback on the pros and cons of that, if anybody has any.
Steve? This is
Yes,
Sue.
Sue.
I just would recommend that you ask Mr. Wilson. He doesn't sometimes like other things brought up aside from what's on the warrant, but I think if you just let him know what you'd like to do, it would be helpful.
Yeah, I was thinking, Sue, mainly in terms of a handout, part of the package of stuff you get as you walk in.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I'm not, unless somebody here wants to make a special appearance at town meeting, we can ask about that.
No, and I think the town clerk handles that portion of it, so
Okay,
coordinate with her.
good to know.
Yeah.
And
Steve, I can
it
help
struck,
with that.
thanks, Sue. It also strikes me that the scouts typically try, and I hope they do again this year, to distribute the town report and other materials to every house.
So
My
Steve, I can
understanding
give you a little bit of an update on that. The town is running a little bit behind on getting everything to the printer and getting everything therefore back from the printer. So we are going to make every effort. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to use the scouts because next week is the week that we're probably going to be distributing everything, and it's school vacation week, and a lot of kids are unavailable. So we are going to do all hands on deck for the town employees and committees, and anybody who wants to help out is welcome to join us. We just need to figure out exactly when the annual report is going to be back from the printer before we can know exactly what day and what the timing is and all that.
Are we going to try to drop it in a plastic bag on everybody's mailbox?
Yes.
Having done that a couple of years with various Boy Scouts in the back of my station wagon, it's a good day's work for 10 or 12 teams. So, yeah. So that's where working team 5 is right now. Can I jump up to team 1, the usage and demand of drinking water? That's Jeff and company. Have you
Me
guys
and you,
got
I think,
together?
Steve. I don't have anything additional to talk about other than what I already did. You and I need to get together and talk about a few things.
Yep. Well, I'm looking forward to that. Maybe this weekend. Wait a minute, it's Easter. It's going to be hard.
I'll get in touch with you.
Okay, next week. How about working team 2, which is supply and sources?
Is this the time you want my report, Steve?
Ron, are you here as well? I don't think you are.
Ron Master Giacomo is on.
Yep, you're here, but quiet. Yes, that's right. We have 2 Rons.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
Do you have other things to report from team too, besides, I asked Fred if he would brief us on the key points from what he's been looking at and doing.
Well, the group met at Town Hall about 3 weeks ago, and we assigned various tasks to each member, and we were going to reconvene again sometime this month to kind of go over what we've come up with.
Great. That sounds like a great start. So Fred, I imagine you were pursuing your assignment, and would you share with us what you circulated around the team?
Certainly. My assignment was to do things that as a civil engineer, I'm more comfortable with doing. And it related to the status and the protection of our watersheds and our subbasins in particular. I've been doing this for years with MECT. We've done a major effort at this, so it was merely gathering some specifics. I think everybody here should do some basic reading about landforms and water flows, the hydrological cycle, things of that sort. But very basically, the subbasins are the surface waters that affect the sources of our drinking water. And we have basically two of them in Manchester because we have two different groups of water source. I'm going to concentrate just on the northwest one because it's a little more complex and it gives you kind of an idea of issues that are going to be coming up later. And we'll be reporting on that as we go on status. So the basic source of water in the northwest area are the two wells at the periphery of Round Pond and the surface water from Gravelly Pond. So the subbasin northwest, we've been calling it, is smaller than the one in the east, but it comprises actually of 4 towns being a piece of it. So we have Beverly and Wenham, Hamilton, and the northwest corner of Manchester, all lying within that subbasin. Wenham and Beverly are pretty well all developed areas. The one in Hamilton is interesting because the total area of the subbasin that's in Hamilton is 354 acres. And 40% of that area is on conservation land owned by the town of Manchester. The other portion of this is in Manchester itself. And this is an area that is largely of unknown ownership and location of parcels. It's relatively undeveloped, and it's ripe for us to be spending time trying to protect that area. And we've been doing that. MECT and the town of Manchester both own a lot of conservation land in there, but there's a lot of private land that could be developed, and that's something we got to keep our eyes on.
And that's largely Gordon College ownership, isn't it?
That's right. There's a big piece of Gordon College, and that occurs in Wenham, and a little bit in Hamilton, and a portion of Manchester. And what's concerning about that land, the vacant land there, is it's full of survey marks for the last few years, showing that somebody's thinking the big term planning of what's going to happen there. All of the wetland areas have been outlined with surveyors flagging. And the base control lines for studying the whole area have been brought in from the west all the way into the east. So there's a firm that Gordon College has hired to look for the best and highest use of that land. So we got to make sure the best and highest should be water protection and not selling it for housing or other things that could cause problems. So that's the big task ahead of us. One of the concerns in that area is this development, the Country Squire company that's putting a housing development in the Chabaco Woods. And it nestles in the corner between Route 22 in Hamilton and Chabaco Road. Now, what's interesting about this is just south of where then circulate the intended development is the town of Manchester owned conservation land in Hamilton. And further of interest is the aquifer, which lies up near the Route 22 area. And it could be adversely affected, and that could in turn possibly contaminate the groundwater going to our Round Pond wells. Now, I don't know how many of you are aware of the unique nature of Cape Ann granite, and maybe, Steve, we don't have time to get into that, but suffice it to say, any blasting or disturbances similar to what they're going to be doing on Shingle Place Hill in Manchester can open up fissures, which can allow water to get from the surface, pick up contaminants, and easily get it into the groundwater, where it doesn't have to go through the overlying soils that act as natural filters. So I'll leave it at that. Anyone's got specifics or anything wants to talk to us more about it, we can talk about both sub-basins in the same way, both in the east and in the northwest. Turn it over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Fred. That was very concise. I found the comments you made about Cape Ann granite really useful, because the point I took away was that it's a relatively unique formation, unique to right here, therefore appropriately named, and that people who have done any major construction, for example, the construction of Route 128, have had to grapple with the unusual characteristics of this kind of granite. So that was helpful. But
one of my professors at Tufts was the engineer that introduced me to the problems of that. I hadn't heard about it before. Very interesting story we will get into later.
Okay, and I take your main point about it would be easier to preserve that land than to try to manage development in a way that minimize the impact and the risks to the groundwater.
Well, if we've learned anything over the years at MECT, it's the only way to protect land is to own it and then to know exactly where it is.
Very good point. This seems like it might be a good opportunity to ask Scott Horsley to say a couple of words about this so-called Northwest watershed, because as you pointed out to Ashley and me a couple of days ago, Scott, it also includes the land, some of the land on the south side of 128. 128 kind of arbitrarily cuts through this watershed, if I have my facts right. Scott, you want to unmute and make a few comments?
I think, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, first of all, thank you, Steve, for inviting me here. And let me just start by saying I'm really looking forward to working with all of you and contributing what I can. It's I have a sort of long-term interest in Manchester's water resources with some significant hiatuses, but nonetheless, happy to be back here and looking forward to this. I guess what I could do, Steve, is, as you mentioned before, is I can outline what I think my scope is going to be in terms of working with you, so everybody's clear with that. And one of those items involves a little bit about what Fred was just talking about with respect to the developments up in that Northwest watershed. So what I've got here in speaking with Steve and Ashley is really two tasks at this point. One is to attend some of these meetings I don't think all of them, but I've got some scheduled for today, May 25th, and then July 6th as part of this next few months. And so I'll be attending those meetings and any others that you'd like me at, certainly, Steve. The second task I'm just calling technical support, and I think this is something that I need and we need to think about where I can best help wherever you think I can. The three items that we included here as possible sort of sub projects. One is the development of water resource protection regulations. I know that there's been discussion on that. I think there is actually even a proposed reg that has been submitted to the Board of Health. And there may be other opportunities to strengthen regulations. I made a note here, listening already tonight, that maybe another related task could be to look at some of these neighboring towns' existing regulations, because we've got, as Fred correctly pointed out, there are 4 towns in that watershed. And the surveying stakes mean something. I agree with you. And you know, it might be good to look at those regulations in all 4 towns that are, as they apply to the watershed, and kind of see where we're at, because it may be as helpful to think about making some regulatory amendments, or at least try to ask those neighboring communities to make some adjustments to their regulations. But in any case, that's one of the tasks that we outlined was regulatory amendments. The second one is delineation of critical water resource protection areas. As everybody knows, we have a zone 2 and a zone 3, and we have the watersheds delineated for the 2 surface water supplies. It may be useful to think about some updates there, because those delineations have been there for a while. And also maybe some sub delineations. And by that, I mean, for example, with Gravelly Pond or Round Pond, in addition to the watershed. And I think as Fred, you were talking here, and perhaps you and I should talk offline at some point, because it sounds like you're a couple of steps ahead of me here. You know, thinking about these sub basins and maybe calling those out as special management areas within the larger watershed. So that's kind of the second task. Again, that's delineation of protection areas. And that obviously could feed into the prior task in terms of regulatory changes. The third task that we identified is looking at particular development projects. And the one we noted, and I think this is the same one, Steve, that we were just hearing about, 133 Exeter Street in Hamilton. Is that the Chabaco Woods project?
Essex.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Exeter Street. And so I have not even started looking at that, but I certainly can and plan to. And can provide comments back to this group in terms of what I see in terms of threats, and maybe things that could be done to try to mitigate threats. In fact, if there are any, like I said, I haven't even begun looking at that yet. But in any case, those are the tasks that I have, and I'm looking forward to digging into whatever relevant information is available. And like I said, I'm really just starting, so I don't really have much more to say than that, but I'm looking forward to it. And I'll stop there and see if there are any questions, Steve.
Thanks, Fred. Scott, that's exactly what I had in mind. Chuck, did you have some question?
Yeah, I guess I have a couple things to add on this one. The development that you guys have there is quite an extensive amount of information on there. We have reached out to Hamilton DPW at least, and a couple others, and certainly, I like what Scott just said about potential mitigation strategies or whatever. But I would just say that there are a number of engineers and hydrologic engineers that are both pro and against, just like what we see in the 40B here in Manchester, and a lot of experts that have weighed in. So I don't know that we're going to be able to kind of reassert any or reinvent any sort of thing. I'll forward on what I have. I couldn't find it just now in my email, Scott, but
that would be great. Thanks, Chuck.
So
appreciate that.
So I just want to say, it has been thought about pretty extensively. So
Sure.
I don't think we're going to be breaking a ton of new ground. Although certainly if there's other mitigation that we should look at, I'd be happy to insert ourselves where we can. What what was the other thing I was going to say? The other, the thing that might be topical that's, not really relevant to that development necessarily, but, other towns and their planning, the town of Hamilton was before both the planning board and the board of selectmen for repaving of Tobacco Road, which, does go right next to
Yeah.
Round Pond, and as well as, some of the, neighboring, whether it's Manchester land or, Hamilton land or private land. So, that is one thing. And, I will say they spent a lot of time and money engineering that situation. And then the town, actually did vote it down at the, last town meeting. And, I just want to say one of the, ramifications of that might be that they might not want to listen too much when we come back to them and say, hey, why don't you protect this land and make these updates on, your bylaws. So I think that's going to be, certainly a lesson in being neighborly and trying to, affect change on, another town. So I guess I'll leave it at that for now, but it's just another thing to think of. And I wouldn't be surprised if, they do not come back to the town for paving that road or removing the road and, getting it further away from the gravelly pond, but rather just paving it in place, which is kind of a shame, in my opinion. So I'll leave it at that, but I do have some information on the project itself. And, if there's any other information that's out there on the, surrounding Gordon College land or, just other things in general, I'd be interested to read them. The other thing I'll note is, I was at a meeting with Hamilton DPW last week, and there may be an Essex study that's going on for their watershed that I believe it's Alewife Brook watershed, which sort of generally, I think the headwaters are, the Tobacco Lake / Round Pond, all those kind of that watershed there. So that's just something else to keep on the radar. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Yeah, those are fair points. Thank you, Chuck. My observation from having attended some of the planning board meetings in Hamilton is that they're struggling with figuring out what responsibility they bear for the watershed, as opposed to all the other things that a planning board would pay attention to. And particularly other town watershed. This has a well on the other side of Tobacco Lake, and we of course have our wells in Round Pond. So
I will say, Steve, just to add to that, the town of Hamilton does have a well on School Street, which is,
Right.
even closer than Gravelly Pond or Round Pond to the site that's in question. So they
Right.
do have a vested interest, maybe not at the planning board level, but certainly at the DPW water department level.
Yep. My observation was it's kind of a miniature version of what's happening, or a mimic of what's happening here, which is that it's hard to put your finger on one board or commission, except for the Board of Select, and that has responsibility for the watershed. And certainly nobody has specialized responsibility other than really you and Nate. So our effort is, to shed some light on that and hopefully some help as well. But I understand why the Hamilton Planning Board would look at this and say, we don't usually have geohydrologists come and give competing testimony. We don't have battles of those kinds of experts when we're looking at a project. So there's probably some more work to do, is my thought. Sue, I noticed your hand. Sue Brown.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to let Mr. Horsley know that there is a meeting on that, a planning board meeting on that issue, the 21st, April 21st at 7. If that's helpful for you to be there in person to get any questions answered.
Sue, you're talking about the Chapaco Woods project?
Yeah, the one in Hamilton.
Hamilton, yeah, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I will just note, Mr. Wales talked about that, the watershed, what he's called the Northwest watershed, and not only is the Gordon property within that, but also the land west, south of 128, which is what we're calling the Western Woods, which Mr. Wales may know we're looking to preserve that. So I know it's across the 128, so it's not as maybe impactful, but we think that it's a good effort towards that end.
Amen to that. Dan Harrison, you want to unmute?
I'm just wondering whether Chuck or anybody here has any idea of how we could possibly approach Hamilton again about the Tobacco Road. Because as some of you may have read, there appears that there may have been an undercount in the votes in that town meeting. Which is very unfortunate, but I don't know anybody in Hamilton I can approach and say, look, guys, we don't think that the vote, we think that if you approach us again, you could get a different reaction. If anybody has any thoughts how we might do that, I'd be appreciated.
Steve? It's Sue.
Sue, go ahead.
So Anne and Steve, I had that conversation with the Hamilton Town administrator today, just asking if they would consider bringing it back before me. And he said that he would, he passed my request on to, I think he said DPW there. And I'm sure I'm probably not the only one that maybe has asked and suggested that it come back before us. I think people are aware that we think that it might have a different outcome if it were to come back.
Good. That's news to me and potentially good news. Joe, did you want to comment?
Yes, this question was directed to Mr. Horsley. And I was at the first in-person meeting that we had with Ron, with Ashley, and with Fred Wales. It was a great meeting we had. We shared a lot of great ideas. It was great to see the talent that's there, and my thanks to everybody. But a question that I have to Scott Horsley, it was brought up when we attended a meeting at Gordon College with the president. And it was brought up that in the plans of the development that's being looked at on Tobacco Trails is that there is a clause there that states that homes will have the option of building underground tanks for storage of fuel. And I wish, that where Mr. Horsley is going to look at expanding his research on that, that be looked at, because that's very close to our water supply, and underground storage of fuel would, and would hurt our water supply. And we brought that up to the president at Gordon College, and he will look into that with his subordinates. So that's just a point that I'd like to bring out. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Anybody who wants some light bedtime reading, there's about 30 or a little more than 30 pages of conditions on the order that the Hamilton Conservation Commission issued on this project. And I know a couple of the pages deal with the possibility of underground storage, which still kind of baffles me why a homeowner would need a fuel tank, but it's in the paper. So it's been looked at, maybe not to everybody's satisfaction yet. Good point, Joe. All right, anything else on sources and supply? Team 2. Can I ask, has anything transpired on Team 3 about climate change? Mike Carvalho, Parker, and Ann and Ron Parker.
I know Mike couldn't be here for this meeting, so I know he's not on.
Okay.
We've talked about getting together, but we haven't got together yet.
Yeah. I'll recommend to you a piece in the Washington Post in the last couple of days that examines the threat to private septic systems from rising sea level and increasing rain levels. We seem to be much more fortunate here than places like Tidewater, Virginia, where most of the private septic systems are failing every time there's a heavy rain. But
We will certainly look at Raymond Avenue, at Raymond Street.
yeah, I was just going to think we have some low-lying areas where private septic is prevalent, some of it old. By the way, the Concom was happy to see that one of the few remaining cesspools in residential use in Manchester is being upgraded to a full Title V septic system. I don't know how many there are, but I know there's a few. Anything from quality of water and contaminants, working team 4? That's Lynn, Randy, Jessica, Francie,
Yeah.
and Gordon.
We did meet. Jessica, do you want to summarize?
Having a little trouble hearing you, Gordon.
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me okay, Steve?
Yes, we can hear you okay. I don't think I'm getting through to Gordon.
Yeah, so we did have an initial meeting. I think we probably had more questions than outcomes. And Gordon and Randy could fill it if they think. I think one of the things we're sort of curious is what sort of output is, are you expecting sort of bullet points from us? Like, we're supposed to look at what are the contaminants, how bad are they, some of the things like that. Like, what sort of product do you want was sort of one of the questions that we had.
Good question.
Yeah, I guess that was probably our biggest question. And then we definitely had an issue that half our group struggles meeting these afternoon meetings, making these afternoon meetings. So that was definitely a bit of an issue.
Sorry. Well,
I guess we felt that a lot of our stuff was sort of covered in all the work that Chuck had done. Obviously, some of his points had more research, so we were just sort of not sure exactly how to proceed as far as like where we were heading with what we're presenting.
All right, you and I should have a sidebar conversation about that.
Happy
With Sue.
to.
Let's do that.
And then other question, just back to the climate change folks. And do you guys have, the Coastal Resilience Advisory Group did so much work on climate. We had modeling, we had all of that stuff. Is that data somewhere? Yes, no?
I'm sure it's somewhere. I have been following some of it. I'm trying to remember. That's not the right one. I'm sorry. I'm on another group that's the group from Harvard that's currently working on a climate modeling. I have a fair amount of information from them as well.
There was a lot, specific to Manchester that we did with that coastal resilience group that Mary Riley kind of headed up. So I'm just not sure where, I don't know if Sue knows or if Chris Bertoni knows where all that information is, but it must be somewhere.
This is, okay. The title of it is Coastal Resilience.
It was the Coastal Resilience Advisory Group. And I think it has fallen apart since Mary left, but there was a lot of modeling and a lot of work that was done on climate change. And some of it was for the for FEMA, kind of some of that grant. And so there was a lot of work that was done. Yeah.
Okay, I will go dig that out and get it to everybody in my group. Thank you.
Thank you. And Gordon, did you want to try to add to that, if your connection permits?
Steve, he just rejoined. I just re-entered him. He might not even have heard you.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, we did also talk about trying to get a hold of some of the older annual water quality reports from Chuck, and he mentioned that he might have some of those. So that would be helpful, just so we can look at the monitored contaminants historically since 1990 and kind of see what things are changing, see if there's any trends. Chuck, obviously, if you had spreadsheets, that would be great, but we're happy to also just sort of look through the PDFs or whatever and work from those.
But I had a question for Chuck, if you have it at hand. What are the most recent test results showing you? I know that you're paying pretty close attention to PFAS and maybe some other things.
So the latest PFAS round, still doing split samples, and one of them still coming right about the limit for Lincoln Street, and one's a bit lower. So yeah, we're monitoring that closely.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. I won't put you on the spot, but I'm wondering, of course, as a statistician, whether you take the average or the worst of the two, or how do you view split sampling?
So it's an average, basically to get to the state, how the state kind of qualifies or to views it. It's a 3-month average, and then an average of the split samples. So essentially, we're averaging 6 samples, as a rolling average as well.
Got it. And moving that in 3-month intervals. Got it.
Yep.
Steve, if I could jump in here and ask a question of Nate. Nate, you and I talked a little while back, and you gave me a very good summary of all of this. And I have some notes, but I'm trying to recall, do you guys have a contract with somebody who's trying to look for sources of some of the PFAS? Am I recalling that correctly? And if so, can you give us an update on that?
So we have no one that's looking at the sources. CDM Smith just finished up the study that they were doing. I think Greg and Select Board are reviewing that now. So I think once we have their kind of final, blessing on it, we'll distribute that to the larger group.
And what was CDM doing? What was their scope?
Looking at how we would basically, if we needed to treat at Lincoln Street well,
Okay.
how would we do that? Looking at the water quality parameters, evaluating what PFAS remediation, GAC or anion exchange,
Right.
and then just kind of a rough, very planning level design for that, what we would need there.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Thank you.
nothing on the source level, which I think is, definitely something we should look into.
Yeah, I mean, my only quick comment, and Nate, you and I talked about this. This is a problem that I think everybody knows is pretty widespread across the Commonwealth, and DEP's really running fast here to kind of catch up and provide guidance on what to do and how to do it. And certainly there's good information on the treatment end that you were just mentioning, Nate, but in terms of the sources, I think originally the thought was this was coming primarily from firefighting foam, fire training academy type places and industrial sites, but we're finding it in wells across the state that don't have any of that.
Yeah.
That have, more in down here in the Cape where I live, Cape Cod, the other Cape, sorry. Where some of our wells here where we're finding PFAS, all we have is single family homes with septic systems. And as everybody knows, I mean, one of the diverse sources or are just household products and cookware, which is hard to imagine that could cause this problem. But the levels, the standards are so darn low that it really makes it challenging. But I think certainly I would, maybe suggest we can talk further offline, but it seems like this is something that the town might be interested in, along with everybody else trying to research more about where this stuff might be coming from. As I mentioned to you, Nate, the good news in Manchester is a lot of your watershed is not on septic systems, unlike Cape Cod, where virtually all of it is on septic. So
Right.
in a sense, you're much better off because you have the sewer, which takes that source out for the most part, but it's obviously coming from somewhere.
Yeah, actually, there was a PFAS conference in Marlboro last week that I went to, and really the sessions I focused in on were, the fate and transport of it and how they're trying to, locate these sources. A lot of questions still, a lot of questions.
There are.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, is there a way for Team 4 to get a copy of CDM's report?
Yeah, certainly. We'll be sending that out. I would think, if not by the end of the week, early next week.
Yeah,
It needs to be
I
presented to
wanted
the
to
Board of
mention-
Selectmen first.
Okay, that's what it is.
Yeah, it needs to be presented to the Board of Selectmen first, and then we can have it.
Yeah, I wanted to mention too that the state has been assisting some of the towns in trying to identify some of the sources of the PFAS. So there are people within Mass DEP that are are assisting some of the towns with that, source identification.
Great, that's good to hear. I don't want to take us into the weeds here, but I realize that the testing is done around, I think, 6 specific compounds. So in the whole universe of these chemicals,
Well, there are more than 6 that are usually tested, but only 6 are regulated at this point
I
in
see.
Massachusetts. But
okay, thank you.
there can be more that are tested, but I think people talked about, there's thousands of these,
Exactly.
basically PFAS.
Which makes the detective task very complicated.
Yep.
6 might be doable, but thousands is hard.
Yeah, like in the testing that we have done, there's more than the PFAS 6 that are tested for. I'd say it's like maybe 15 or so. And then you'll see hits on some of the other PFAS that are actually not included in that total. So it's, it was especially very, very early on, it was confusing, when you got test results back, because they weren't specifically identifying which ones added up to your quote unquote PFAS 6 total. But they're much better about that now.
Good. And I know some of these have a distinctive fingerprint. For instance, the very first one was a byproduct of cooking with Teflon, PFOA. And if I have that right, it should be fairly straightforward to trace that, assuming it isn't used anywhere else. I don't know if that's true of any of the other compounds. It's hard for laymen to know where they're being utilized. Is it your impression, Nate in particular, or Scott, somebody who's looked at this, Randy, that each compound could trace to a lot of different sources, or do they each have a kind of a distinctive fingerprint that this one came from fast food packaging and this one came from military bases and this one came from firefighting foam?
Yeah, I think that they've got different signatures, and you'd probably need someone that does more forensic analysis to take a look at, what patterns they're seeing and, collect samples. So, it would be, probably more of a study, unless there's, of course, a source that's kind of obvious,
Like a military base right next to our well.
Right, which yes, luckily Manchester doesn't have
So
that.
I'm going to guess that the people with that specialized knowledge are in great demand at the moment.
Very much so.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know specifically how they all like you're saying, PFOAs to Teflon, or if it's PFOS that goes to the AFFF, firefighting foam. I'm not exactly sure of those links.
Hey, Randy, could you tell me who the DEP person is you've been speaking with?
There isn't any particular person,
Okay.
but I know that DEP has actually gotten money to look into PFAS, and they've hired a number of people. So
Yes.
there are some people that have been assisting some of the towns, but
Okay. Thank you.
I can probably try to find out.
I was just wondering if you were already in touch with somebody there, have a dialogue on the issue.
Yeah, I'm not really sure who the contact person is, but I know there's been some assistance to the town.
Sure.
So,
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
This
good.
isn't the only town that has, an issue, obviously.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the last group. I'm not sure anybody from group 6. Well, Peter, you're here. Tom Keogh had a competing meeting.
Tom's here and John's here. We're all here.
All right. I stand corrected. What's cooking on team 6?
We've met once, but we have not met since we had the tours 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Sorry I was late. The training for the town meeting election workers ran late.
Oh, yes. Well, glad to have you. Thank you. Next up on our agenda is the ongoing update of the recommendations from your infamous report, Scott, the Horsley Witten 1990 report on water resources. And Sue's been working diligently on that with some assistance, a little bit of assistance from me and I think from Anne as well. And I'm pretty sure it's not anywhere near final yet, but it's certainly ready for comment and correction and suggestions. So Sue, I believe you circulated that this afternoon.
I did.
Okay, I would just ask people to take a look at it in the next few days and make some notes, highlight things that are particularly pertinent to what you're working on. The devil's in the details with this stuff, as with many things that we're going to look at, and some of those recommendations are kind of headings for many potential new policies and regulations underneath them. So
And
is
I
there
need
any
to
more?
remember to send it to Scott because I didn't send it to Scott. But I
Thank
will.
you. Thank you.
Back to the horse's mouth. Sue, was there anything there you wanted to highlight today for people to focus on or give you some quick reaction to?
I was surprised at how much of it actually got implemented, to be honest. And it looks like a good part of it seems to be implemented sort of right after the report came out. Almost all of the Board of Health regulations were taken almost verbatim and added in the 1990s. Of course, you know, the bylaws, I mean, the regulations for the Board of Health, of course, don't look the same as they did in the 90s, but they were implemented pretty much just as they were suggested back in the 90s. And over the course of 30 years, you know, tanks have been disposed of because we've had time. You know, if we were doing this, you know, 20 years ago, we probably would still have a lot of tanks in the ground that aren't there anymore. So, you know, that was nice to know that a lot of the cleanup of contaminants was happening just because of time passing. But yeah, I'd love anybody's feedback on this, especially Scott, since he kind of can look at some of the things that I've highlighted in our bylaws to say, is this enough? What's changed? What else do we need to look at? I don't know any of that stuff. So, but I did try to highlight where things were and that sort of thing.
No, it's a good job so far. Thank you.
Francie has a question.
Yes, please.
I just thought it was a good idea for us as we're looking at it. It's very impressive. There are lots of yeses that these new regulations have been written. But the question is sometimes, are they being enforced? And do we need to look carefully at how we could make sure they're being enforced, some of them? So while we're looking at them, I think that's a good question. They can be on the book. They can be on the books, but
right,
you know.
I know you had mentioned at one point in an email, like the buffer zones and that whether or not the buffer zones are actually being, absolutely, you're right. And that I don't know. So that's another thing that we should definitely look into.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about the gas station entry? I guess when I read the report the first time, I thought it was referring to the gas station that I see there now. But now looking at your thing, it's referring to a gas station that used to be somewhere further down the street.
Yep.
Is the gas station that is currently on Summer Street and even closer to the well something that we should be concerned about?
I think that's a great question.
I don't know the answer.
Okay. Was it there in 1990, that gas station, or?
Yes.
Oh, it was. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bailey's?
Yeah, Bailey's at that point. The
Oh,
gas
right.
station that's in the report was the gas tanks, I believe, that were at 76 Summer Street, where the little gray office building is now and where Joe Lynn Lobster is out the back.
So I guess the question would be, why would the other gas station not be included? Was it deemed not as concerning?
The one at 76 was a catastrophe at the time.
in terms of maintenance and aging?
It was actually leaking.
Ah,
Well, was it open or was it closed at the time? Because if it was closed, the tanks obviously should be removed regardless.
The tanks have been removed.
Right, but were they, was it an operating gas station in the mid-90s?
It was an operating, I
Okay,
believe it was. It had to be removed in any case because it was
Okay.
leaking.
I think that's the distinction here. If it's an operating business, it's being monitored, but if something is closed, yeah, if you've got tanks, they've got to go.
Yeah,
Alright, good.
if they've had a release of, anything from the tanks and that was reported, that would have gone through, a whole investigation through, and the information would have been submitted to Mass DEP. So, there's a fairly easy way to look up that information online. You can look up that particular address to see if anything was reported and if, there was any contamination that was, addressed or taken out, and if the site has been closed out or not.
good. Thank you. And I guess, Scott, when you take a look at it, please highlight areas where best practices have moved in 30 years, particularly on things like the protection zones.
I will do that, Steve. Thank you. And I'm sorry that I have to leave for another meeting, but we'll be in touch shortly. So
Good.
thank you all.
We
Thank
value
you for
your
your time.
presence. Next item on our agenda is a discussion of regional approach. And I don't have a lot to ask or to say about that, except that it's becoming more obvious as we collect more information that the 4 towns that Fred's identified in the Northwest watershed are clearly an opportunity to collaborate, which currently is evidently not the case. We collaborate when a particular issue arises, like relocating Tobacco Road. But otherwise, it's kind of every tub on its own bottom. So I'm entirely open to suggestions about how we approach that, how we open up those discussions and make some progress. It would be easier if we had, a counterpart when the Concom in Manchester talks to the Concom in Hamilton. The administrators can talk and then members can meet and whatnot. It's relatively easy.
Steve?
Yes, Tom.
If I may comment on that, we touched on that a little bit in our meeting that we had about 3 weeks or so ago, and we are planning to put together a questionnaire for all of the contiguous towns to see what their practices are and come up with some best practices. I'm generally encouraged by the report that Sue provided to us earlier this afternoon. So much has been implemented, we must be doing something right. So I'm encouraged that many of our practices seem to be working out, but nevertheless, I think we need to address this regional thing. And as we pull together a questionnaire in the coming weeks and months that we will then kind of run through with these towns, this collaborative regional approach, I think, has to be part of that questionnaire. I mean, given the fact that so much feeds into our overall water supply.
Yeah, thanks for
Such as
that, John. And Chuck, you have your hand up.
I just want to, so when you say, regionalization type cooperation, are you talking on the actual drinking water side, or just the kind of watershed protection / development, best practice type stuff? Because I think there is quite a bit, or at least, Nate and I on a regular basis, do a lot of collaboration on the, water, actual drinking water at your tap kind of level of regionalization, but not so much the other.
Yeah, I think they have to go together, don't they? I mean, one is sort of the carrot. And
yeah, well, so from a, strictly from a, water drinking water at your tap kind of approach, regionalization is going to be tough. There's a lot of restrictions, as we talked about. There's a lot of, stuff that goes into it on the, treatment side and the, permitting and registration side. So last week, for example, I was at a meeting with Hamilton. They have a study underway, strictly looking at water supply for, drinking water purposes, not so much the watershed approach or anything like that, but their withdrawals from the Ipswich River Basin, which is the basin they're in, versus us in the North Coastal Basin, is what kind of dictates, their issues that they have. They're water poor, so to speak, and we're water rich. Certainly, everything's out the window if you don't protect your watershed and it comes contaminated or some other emerging contaminant comes into play. But anyway, I guess from that perspective, it's really hard. Hamilton, so part of their study is they're looking at, they're looking to Manchester, can we supply them with water in the future, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, whatever. Then they're also, having that same conversation with the Salem Beverly Water Board, who's their, the other next door water supplier. They're going to have that same conversation with Topsfield. And then, their consultant is looking at, if, within, these kind of, different permitting, requirements and, water quality requirements, what is kind of the best outcome that, Hamilton could ever expect. And, the short answer is nobody is giving away, their water rights. And so you would have to work cooperatively, and nobody, DEP from a regulatory perspective is not giving away, any more water out of the basin. So you can't just pump more water. You can't pump your way out of it, especially in the Ipswich Basin. But even, the North Coastal, that's not really going to be, part. So what it really comes down to is, for example, and, I'm just throwing these kind of numbers out there, but our permit, for Manchester is 0.72 MGDs, million gallons per day. I just finished the ASR this year, and, we did about 0.59. So, we might have 130,000 gallons a day under our current registration that we could wheel to Hamilton. That's not going to solve their problem if their rough demand is, say 1 million gallons a day, or, say the same 720,000 gallons a day. We're not, the 0.1 or 130,000 gallons a day doesn't get you there. But if you could get 130,000 gallons a day from Manchester, a couple 100,000 gallons a day from Salem Beverly, could you make it work? And so then it's theoretically possible. But now, okay, say you get DEP to buy in and everybody's under their permit and the water qualities match up, and so you solved all the engineering problems. Then you have a capital allocation problem, because the people of Manchester have been paying the going rate on the water supply for however long, 50 something years, when they're building out the well and the new plant, and which isn't new anymore, and then all the subsequent upgrades to the the distribution system itself, and keeping in compliance with all the regulatory issues. And so if you look at, say, our water rates and Hamilton's water rates, how are the people of Hamilton going to justify basically the, say, couple $1 million of capital improvements that it would cost to get the water there in the first place, even though our water plant is in Hamilton, and it would be theoretically not that far. These projects cost in the millions of dollars. And then there's a question of, okay, are you going to pay the rate that Manchester's going to pay? And the answer is probably not. You're probably gonna have to upcharge. So anyway, I'm just saying, like, these kind of problems just compound all the way through. And so from, that's a tough one to fathom, really going anywhere on, at least on the drinking water side. Certainly the coordination between, watershed protection and, best management practices for the watershed, that's a big thing. But anyway,
really good points.
To say.
I don't want to minimize those because we can't.
And so there will be a forthcoming report from from that study, and once I get it, it's probably months away, but it'll be interesting to read.
Okay. One question for you. That's a lot of hurdles you'd have to get over to share water. Does the state, would the state regulate, as long as we're under our withdrawal cap, would the state regulate us kind of wheeling it to another town?
Well, like I said, they would regulate it insofar as that we certainly wouldn't be able to just pump more. So if our level is 0.72, it's not like they say, oh, you're giving, this much to Hamilton, so you can do 0.82 or,
Right.
0.92. They wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of first hurdle. And then they certainly would, be questioning, kind of all these water quality parameters, which at a water quality level, it actually, the waters do match up very well, and not just the raw water side, but the finished water side. So it would be, so they would definitely be in the loop, and they would have to kind of approve all of that. And, it kind of goes back to, especially, given the situation in Flint, that kind of whole thing kind of manifested from basically a change in water source, and nobody was really paying attention to that. And it caused the lead to leach into the water, that people were drinking. So that, that's top of mind, especially on a regulatory front. So I think that actually the waters are good candidates, though, that we wouldn't have any of those issues. And most cities and towns are getting rid of the lead that they do have left anyway. But if we were Flint, it'd be a big problem. So yeah, they would be involved. They would definitely have approval rights and, so on and so forth.
Correct. Jessica's got a great question in the chat also about kind of large incremental changes in our demand for water. Say we built an apartment complex on Shingle Hill.
I guess just so, if we were, I guess that, there are kind of, methods for determining how much water, and, the developer, for whether it's a 40B or a CST or any other development, would need to kind of give us kind of their baseline of what they think they'll use. And we'd have to evaluate it based on our system at the time, and, what potential there is for, being over our registration. I haven't read sort of that, you're able to just, deny it out of hand because of such a thing. But certainly right now, the amount that, these different projects are asking for versus where we are in our registered permitting, I'd say it's not really an issue that, I
Right.
think we could hang our hat on. But, it's something that we definitely need to evaluate and, keep track of.
Fair enough. Any other comments on this complicated subject called regionalization or regional approach? All right, we're going to keep it on the table. The last three items here for today are more procedural. I have a proposal about task force meetings. I can't figure out how to fix the afternoon versus evening issue. Many of you, like me, serve on other boards. Some of those boards meet very frequently. So evenings are complicated. On the other hand, we're losing a half dozen important members at the 4:30 time slot. So I'm open to any suggestions about that. But in terms of the interval, I was going to suggest that we continue meeting bi-weekly and ask that 2 of the 6 working teams prepare updates for each meeting. So that'll both shorten the time we spend on the working teams and give some more certainty to each of the teams, and create for the teams a 6-week cycle of reporting in. Nothing to stop teams from raising questions or reporting interesting stuff in the interim, but no, that would mean no requirement to report the working team results except on the 6-week interval. What do you think of that? Silence mean acquiescence or just?
It sounds,
dinner
that
time?
sounds good to me.
Sounds good to me, Steve. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
So that would mean we'd have another meeting on the 27th of April, correct? And I think it'll be appropriate for Team 5, Helen and my team, to report at that one, because we'll be doing something for town meeting and starting the survey. What other team would like to tee up for the 27th. We may have to create a volunteer here. I guess my recommendation would be to stick with team 2, the supply and sources, if that's okay with Ron and Fred and Joe and Ashley in absentia. Can you folks pull together a summary for next 2 weeks?
I can talk to the team. I'll personally will be kind of busy preparing for town meeting, but we can talk to the team.
All right. Good. And then Sue and I will figure out what the other 2 pairs are that go on the cycle of the other 3 weeks, the other 3 every 3rd meeting. We also have, yes, Fred.
I will come up with something that goes into more depth for team 2 by the 27th.
Excellent. Thank you, Fred.
And I could assist Fred in that also, okay?
Good.
Okay.
No blasting of Cape Ann granite, please. Just kidding. I'm sorry to bring this up now. I forgot about it, but I wanted Scott to give us a quick update on the monitoring wells that he has already installed. I think a couple of them are in, and others are coming before the Concom for permitting. They are designed to figure out and definitively how water moves underground from Cedar Swamp to the Lincoln Street well. The 1990 report strongly hypothesized that there was a significant amount of feeding of the aquifer of the well from that, but wasn't able to drill the monitoring wells to prove it, to have conclusive evidence. And the good news is that in the last 30 years, these wells have become easier and cheaper to dig, so that I think MECT has taken it on the task of funding some of the wells on their property. There'll be some on town right away along Hidden Ledge Road, and there may be some just abutting the county club and the area of the well itself. So that'll be interesting to report on. And apropos of that, a couple of us have asked Scott for advice about whether it makes sense to do some of the similar monitoring wells around the ponds, so we can be more conclusive about where water is moving, and therefore either more or less worried about the landfill areas, for example, or the development proposed north of the ponds. Next item is to vote on the minutes from our last meeting, which was March 16. Are there any edits or additions?
I'll make a motion the minutes be accepted as presented.
Thank you, Tom.
Or a second?
Second.
Thank you, Sue. I'll ask for anyone who is opposed to indicate by raising hand digitally or literally. And seeing no opposition, it'll be a unanimous vote. Thank you. Our last item is anything we forgot or omitted. So I throw the floor open for that. Helen.
Yeah, just a quick comment. Looking through Sue's very comprehensive list here, I go to number 14, which is one that always sits very important to me, which it says pursue any and all steps possible to acquire conservation restrictions and or title to property within zones 1, 2, and 3 for gravelly and round ponds. Which of our working groups does that fall under?
My guess is it's primarily under supply and sources, but secondarily under contaminants, because that's got to be a primary strategy for ensuring that there's adequate filtration and
Yeah, Sue's comment is that it's ongoing, but I don't see any real energy being put into it. And I would like to work on it with others, of course. Who those, you can pick out who those others might be, where you'd want me to fit in.
well, it's not a pipe dream. I think, having seen what town people were willing to do when SEMA asked for funding to take a fairly dramatic step.
Well, it
Strikes
is,
me that this would be the same kind of scope.
it is big money, but you know, the state routinely has been giving big money to support that kind of an approach.
Right.
And so we should really pull together what the realities are financially. It just shouldn't sit there idly, I think. That's all.
Yep. Yes, right now it's brick by brick, particularly in the western woods. And as many of you probably know, there is a parcel, kind of a pivotal one, right on the edge of the woods at the end of Crooked Lane that has come on the market.
Yes.
And of course, Sue is,
We could have partners too, you see, just to look into the basic, how these things work. Get something before us that is reliable.
Anne, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm concerned that our afternoon meetings are, I recognize the difficulty of evening meetings. I go to several. But we're losing people, and perhaps we could arrange to alternate afternoon and evening meetings. And perhaps the next one, we could find it, if we step in now and say that on the 27th, we're going to have a meeting at 6 or 6:30, perhaps we could get other people to move around.
Anybody have the calendar handy? Is that another ZBA meeting?
What was the date?
27.
That is a ZBA meeting.
Was my suspicion.
The planning board is the 26th.
Is he busy? What happens on Thursday night, Sue, if you've got the calendar?
There's nothing in my calendar, but I'm not tuned into all the boards and committees. I don't FinCom or others I'm not aware of. So, but planning board, ZBA are not meeting. Board of Selectmen are not meeting that night.
I think the FinCom, sometimes, I know they meet on Thursdays, but I think the Thursday after town meeting is unlikely to be one of them.
I think you're right, Ann.
All right, would people indicate whether they could not do a Thursday evening, say 6:30 meeting? 28th.
The problem is you're asking the people who can do afternoons.
I understand. So the question is, how many of us folks would we lose to pick up? I'm guessing 4 or 5 folks who don't come in the afternoon. Sue, can I ask you to follow up on this and do a little doodle poll or something else to see what the attendance would be if we did it on a Thursday evening. This may be an
Absolutely.
exceptional Thursday evening, but let's go for it.
Okay, yep.
Good, thank you, Ann. That is helpful. Sue Brown, did you have anything else?
I was just going to mention that to Helen, that I am always on the lookout for conservation land. We did identify one happen chance that was close to the Western Woods, but unfortunately, they have already received an offer. Because again, unfortunately, the town cannot move that quickly to produce an offer. We were getting ready to, we had an appraiser set up to do an appraisal. We have to have one of those done to know how much we can spend on property. And while we were doing that, the owner got an offer. I have been in touch with a representative of the owner to ask if they might be interested in a conservation restriction, because it is a parcel that is highly impacted by wetlands, vernal pools, and a deeded right of way. So I'm hopeful that we will have a positive outcome in a discussion with the potential new owner. So Helen, I'm always looking there for you, just so you know.
Thank you. But you're right, you operate at a disadvantage in speed and size of purse and a few other things. Thank you for doing it, though. All right, if there's nothing else, thank you all for 80 minutes, and let's keep up the good work. Can I hear the famous motion?
I move we adjourn.
Thank you. There's a second, and if there are no serious objections, we stand adjourned. Good night.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.